My name is Mark Scherer. I have been a core developer of CakePHP for quite many years now. I think overall I started probably about 13 years ago. Yeah. And I am a software architect at Spryker Systems, where we actually also use CakePHP in a more internal capacity. Where are the... One second, I'm just confused about my slide notes, where they went. How can I add them again? I am confused. All right, I guess I'll do it without the notes. So our topic now is queuing and deferred execution. And that is an important piece of most modern applications, web applications. But why is it so important? Why is it useful? So usually you want to have a very quick response time to your end user. So if it's a contact form and you are sending an email in that contact form to an admin, you don't want to wait for the API, whatever gateway you're using, to give you maybe a response in 2 or 3 seconds. It could sometimes take that long, some timeouts. You want to just defer that to a background process and let that one run. And even if it takes longer, that wouldn't be an issue, and you can directly give feedback to that person. Hey, we received your email. We are sending it now. Thank you. Done. That also prevents the F5 accidental multiple execution. And with emails and any API call for that matter, you can rerun. So when there is an error, a network error, you can see that in the queue, and the queue will just report, hey, this one didn't work, and then you can click retry. And in some queue implementations, as well as the one we're going to use today, there is often already an auto retry built in. So you can configure that, and you can say, hey, if it fails, then at least try it one more time after a few seconds. And if then it doesn't fail, then you can still notify me, or we can manually intervene. So it already takes a lot of that problem away. And of course, scaling and parallelization. So when you have a lot of jobs, small jobs that you need to do, you can even scale them on the same computer or across multiple computers, multiple servers, for example, in cloud-based systems, and have a very good and very quick parallelization of a lot of background jobs. Oftentimes, this is used by larger companies, for example, video processing. So they send this into just a stream, a cloud of servers, and then those servers just are there to work to process all of these jobs. And at the end, they report back to the website, hey, your video has been rendered. You can now display it in a smaller size or something like that. So to this, what also is called asynchronous background processing, we're going to use the queue that I have maintained over the last years. There are different ones in the awesome list that you can look at. They often have more dependencies though. So this one has 0 dependencies. It just uses basic PHP. And therefore it's a good exercise, a good one to use now for our little workshop. There are some demos on the sandbox if you're curious. I don't want to dive too much into them now. You can try them out on your own, download and install it, and just play with that as well. Timeout-based ones that you can trigger jobs in the night, all of those things. I'm not sure how far you're now set up. Based on the previous workshops, I think you can already use any of those branches that you have been using. So you should be fine when you just continue using those. There is a migrations file in there. Let me see if I can find that. yeah, there is a migrations file which contains one table that we want to probably use. So just make sure that you executed this migration file, or just have this table manually created with files and basic stuff like name, path, whatever. Yeah, so it doesn't matter too much what the fields will be. This is the table we're going to use, and you can just make sure that you have your setup of this table in your database. And we can use both Postgres or MySQL. So in case you didn't install that Postgres database, everything is agnostic through the migrations. So executing that on MySQL should yield the same results. All right. When you made sure that the plugin is now installed with Composer require the Euromark CakePHP I can show you that in the Composer JS. So here I already put it in, but you can just require that manually. Composer require CakePHP and any version number 5, which is the CakePHP 4 compatible branch. Make sure that you load the plugin as usual, because you want to have it in your application. So down here, you will probably load this plugin as well. While people are setting it up, a quick tip from earlier, as we heard already, use the IDE plugin. So I also already added it here in the require dev section, because this way you can, let me see where that is, here. You can just do a quick command. I can show you the list. PHP Storm is for autocomplete for PHP Storm IDE. So this is the most powerful one, of course. There's a simpler one for at least partial things, but I would definitely recommend this together with the IDE to have full autocomplete across your application, because this way you can type ahead on most of these things. So if we go back to the code, here, if you add the Q plugin, you can just select it from the list of available plugins and have that already available. The command to execute here is the PHP Storm one. A tip from my side, when you have it as a script in here, it's easier. So I always just, if I added a new plugin or anything, I just call Composer setup, and that executes the code completion generate and the PHP Storm generate. Yeah, so if I go back now to mine, Composer setup is everything I need, and it runs those things and generates the meta files that the IDE needs to understand this. So I will execute this later as well for a few times, just so that you know. Composer commands can definitely make things easier, also for the migrations that we will see later. Okay. So make sure that you execute also the migrations for the queue now. Instead of just using migrations migrate, we want to also now execute and add those tables. I think I already did that, so I already have my tables. I can still do it though. Migrate minus PQ, or I can do a status, then you will see that it's already done. Okay. So, and it's all done. And if I would migrate it again, it wouldn't do anything. So, yeah. Good. If it works, if the plugin works, and if it's added properly, then it actually should be able to see some dashboard in the backend. We can make sure that this works. For that, is that even in here yet? Ah, I think here, /admin/q. Yep, I think it works, but apparently some permission issues. Should Shouldn't it be just a cache command? Cache clear. Oh. Cache list. There is no all. That's weird. Or is it clear all? No. But I know that it's models, right? Or what's it called? Clear all. Underscore. Yeah, there we go. So probably just some permission issue because I execute something as root. I have a new Docker setup and I probably don't have all the permissions just yet. Usually work in a vagrant box, and for Docker, I have a Postgres. I needed to use this more ad hoc. So yeah, it doesn't look nice because it's, I think, a Bootstrap 4 template by default, or Foundation together. This one, I don't think has any template. It's like this milligram template. So as to be expected, you would need your own customized template to overwrite this. In order to fully use it, you will need some additional configuration. I found that out as well when I tested it. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. So we go into this code. Where is the code? Yeah. And inside of the config app, we put it somewhere at the end, maybe. I already put it there. So this one I think is important, and maybe a few others, because you want to define how long your queue worker is going to process things. By default, I usually use a not so long time on the runtime, but I start more jobs. So each minute I start one job, and every job lasts 3 minutes. That gives me 3 parallel processes over time to work with. And if one crashes, the next one will be there in a minute again. So it's not that big of a deal. And depending on how much long this job is, you will have to adjust those times a bit. Yeah, so we should also be able to actually execute a queue now. So if we look into the commands for the queue, where is the queue? Here. Yeah, that's still not a command, but a shell. So that's why it has subcommands. You can see that there are a few commands already there that you can use. The normal background processing would work through the run worker. So this one, usually you never execute manually, but you use a cron job to do that for you. So you go in the cron tab and you say, this every minute, please execute this. If you do that now as a manual worker, you can see its debug output, which just tells you that there is nothing to do, obviously. So now we want to just test it pretty quick. You can do that as well by adding a job. We can add fake jobs. There's some demo jobs. So it tells you that there is, for example, a costs example, some exception example. So it will show you how it handles exceptions, a monitor example that you can monitor in the background, progress. It's nice to see how progress, longer working tasks like video processing over 2 minutes could actually be monitored as well. Retry, the first one fails and then it actually works. So it simulates a few edge cases. Unique and costs are something specifically for a demanding server environment. So when you have a composer update that, in our case, for example, can take up to 2 gigabytes of data, you want to make sure that it only runs on a specific instance of a server once, because it only has 4 gigabytes or something. So you can give it a costs factor of 55 of a total of 100, and then it would only run this command per server once. And the rest of the costs would just be divided by easier jobs that are not that costly. And unique, you can define that everything runs only uniquely and never in parallel. So let's execute a, I don't know, a progress example. Queue. add progress example. So now we execute the run worker, which will process this now. And after 120 seconds, will report back that it finished this job. And we can also look at this in the backend. So if we wanted to go into this queue, we can see that it actually progresses this one. And it doesn't have any hchecks, this view. It's too error prone for without any real templating. So it just has normal refresh F5. So as long as I refresh the page, I can see the progress happening. And the same data you can also give to your users. So if they wanted to have that, you can make an hchecks button or an info window that just that displays this progress to them in real time. And then they would know, okay, I have to wait another, whatever, 50 seconds or calculate it however that long it takes. Any questions so far in the chat? Let me see if I can make the chat window appear again somehow. No? So that's the wrong window anyways. So no questions yet. All right. Maybe I just have to take this to a different screen so I can actually monitor when yeah. This way I guess I can monitor it better. So this job is almost finished. Afterwards, it will also be part of the statistics, by the way. So you can use them to calculate even how long things are going to take in average. Okay, there we go. That's finished. Now let's go back to the slides. Where did those go, by the way? I think. Yeah. Good. So now to the actual usage. I already told you a little bit about what most websites should actually use it for. So always try to take away emails from the direct communication. Always put any email stuff as a asynchronous process into the queue. So especially here, contact forms, register process when you have a new person registering on your website. Any messaging that you do, like, hey, you got a new message on from someone on that website because there's a messaging system built in, and you send an email or some kind of summary of how many new mails or messages that person currently has in their inbox. So these things, yeah, as I said, the idea is to just have a better feedback direct loop, and that it is able to rerun on errors, and you can still at some point display information about the queue jobs that didn't work, because each queue job can have a specific ID, and with that specific ID, you can match it, for example, to that user, and then you can, for the specific user, give specific reports about something that worked or didn't work. And you can also, of course, always monitor the queue system. And if things fail too often, you should definitely escalate that to someone. Before we start with that, we can now actually do a contact form. So should be rather quick to actually try it out. So I want to do that in our application. For that, I think I need to exclude that again. Yeah, good. For that, we just create a contact form. So for reasons I already created one. Not sure how much time we have in total, so I just want to speed up a little bit. In the end, it's just a normal controller that has some security stuff later that will be relevant. For now, it will not. A contact form. I'm using a Tools contact form, so it's from the Tools plugin. But in the end, you can just extend any form, normal form, and add some schema to it. Name, email, subject, body. A little bit of validation maybe. And there is not much more magic behind it. So it's really just the build schema to add a few fields with a specific length. So the form will already render this properly. And in your contact controller, you will use this form. And if you posted this form, you will extract the data that you have just posted. And you will execute this form with that data. And probably you can even put some of that inside. So this execution just renders the form. The sending happens outside in a different method here. Maybe some of that could actually be already like put inside. But here, let's see what the send function does. So if we remove all the noise, then yeah, this sends an email to the admin. So just set to an admin email. Some subject like, hey, someone wants to contact you through the contact form. A template, you might not even need a template. You can usually also just directly deliver a message with a string. So either way would probably work. And then you send it. And for the displaying, I display some query strings. So you can already pre-populate it with a username, for example. If the customer is logged in, you don't have to force him to re-enter his name. It would be possible to just already pre-populate some of that data based on some session information or something like that. So in our case, if we go to the contact form, I think it's just contact. Yeah, the template. Did I not create the template yet? No, of course not. I need to also create the template. Let me copy that. Templates. Yeah. So the template is a basic form with exactly those fields that were in the schema. Submitting it, done. Now it should display that form exactly. The schema also shows you that this now is a text field instead of a normal field. So browsers understand that, and that's pretty nice as well. As you can see, it doesn't need any configuration. Oh, it probably doesn't need, right? I can probably just remove that and it should still work fine. Yeah, so it's redundant information. It already knows that from the schema as well. We can add some demo data, test. Did I not enter the right data? Or what's going on here? Name, email, subject, body. Name, email, subject, body. My guess is that this data is probably not filled out. Also, I don't have all the configs yet that I probably have on my normal websites. So let me just fix that by saying, whatever, send it to me. And in my name, please. This is me. Yeah, I think that must be it. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Now we have a different error. The template for the email we also need. So inside of the templates for email in text, because we're not sending HTML just yet, we want to have a contact field that can contain a subject, a message, user infos, something like that. It's from the sandbox. So in this case, let's call it CakeFest contact form submission. So, okay. And if I resend that now, then the email is actually sent. I used the debug setup, so it's probably put in the debug bar somewhere. I didn't set it up completely though, so I guess we won't see much yet, so that's fine. But this way we can send now old school emails, yeah? So, but this is the part that we do not want. So if you find your contact form like this, we can now quickly rewrite it into a queue-based system. And let's do that now. So imagine you have a classic setup. There is a queue job already, a queue task, email task, already set up to be used. And it has two options. Either you can pass the mailer completely, or you can manually define and pass all the fields. If you pass the object, then it will be serialized and unserialized. I've never used that before, but it would actually be interesting if that still works in Cake4. So since we have that, and we don't use the send, we should be able to quickly put that into the queue. We can just see how it happens, how it works. So for that, we need to instead load the model for it, the queue model. So you can see the autocomplete now is really useful because plugins, you don't need to type the full plugin name now. You can just select from the list. So I select queue and I hit enter and that's it. So that's pretty fast. When you, of course, now try to use it, you will see there is no autocomplete. So that's not what we want. So for this, as I said earlier, you want to make sure that you have some commands ready to always pre-populate things. If I add a new plugin, I do the composer setup. For this specific one, I need the annotations. So I need an annotation added in here to be quickly able to use this model with all its autocomplete functionality. For that, we can go into the command line, and the IDE helper has an annotate. So we annotate. If you don't know what to annotate, you can see there are several things, but you can always use all as a trick. And with the filtering, you can quickly say what you want. So contact. That way it will just skip everything that doesn't have the name contact in it. So it will be instant, like 1 second. Oops, done. And it added this one line in the controller of the contact controller up here for the queue jobs. So now all I needed is that in order to have my autocomplete on queue jobs, and then the autocomplete on all that stuff that you have available, which most importantly now is the method create job. Also here again, you have autocomplete now on all of the different jobs that already are available, the demo jobs. And here we want to select the email. The second argument is the data or the object. Just to know if it's a run. So it's in the settings. If it's the settings mailer, then it should work. So let's see. Data. Data is settings. And then the email object, or the mailer object. Probably should call it mailer. It's less confusing. So, yeah, if that works, we'll find out when the queue job runs. So let's see. First, we want to put this into the queue. That means I'm going to just quickly add a test demo. Okay. And then we execute the queue. All right. So unserialization is obviously not the best thing to do. That's good to know. Will be something to actually look into and fix. As I said, I've always used a manual setting of those things. So in my case, Where did it go? Oh yeah, here. In my case, I used this kind of setup. Settings, and I don't need all that anymore. I can remove all of that. I don't need the manual instance. I'm loading the model. Apparently, we don't even need the name anymore. Okay. I'm using to, from, subject, and the template, and the vars. Content can be empty because it's a templated mail. And that should be it. So let's see what happens now when I do that. So again, test me, and executing the queue. Yeah, so job email finished. The email was sent, done. Cool. So this is the first part. I'm going to wait a little bit for everyone to maybe also try that out if you want to. I can also, in the meantime, try to just remove the template actually and put the content in here. So that would be, I think, the message. And we don't need any vars anymore. We're sending a basic email with exactly that text without any magic going on. That should also work fine. Yeah, ID number 2 is also successful. So both of that works, either templated or just a basic email. Then there's, of course, HTML emails where you want to set up both HTML and text versions and so on and so on. Attachments you can add. Some of that might actually be more complicated using the array syntax. There you probably want to use, like maybe you can create your own email task, and that can handle objects, also mailer objects, for example, and serialize and unserialize them properly. That would be a very good addition to your own stack of jobs, because you can always create custom jobs, and then probably, yeah, I'll dive into that in the next slides. So any feedback so far? No, this is no official plugin. This is my plugin. There is a draft for an official Cake PHP Q plugin, as linked in this channel. But so far, I think it needs some love. Like some people need to actually look into finishing it, and then it can be used and promoted as such. Yeah, so of course, those have a bit more sophisticated usage. But I can tell you from experience so far that this Q plugin is also, it's used already quite a lot in many applications from what I've heard so far. And we are also using it daily with a lot of jobs. And that already works quite well in our PHP environments. All right, I guess I can move on. Or what's the plan now? Do we finish my thing and then go back to the other presentation of Mark's story, or how do you want to proceed?
You can keep going, and if Mark can enter, worst case, his is not letting him back into this webinar. So we may have to just share a link and everybody go in, to a new webinar. So if you want to finish, and then we can hop back with Mark, when you finish your presentation.
Sure. What's the timetable now for me to finish? Like, do you know how long?
You've been going about 30 minutes, right?
Are you sure? It should be a 2-hour slot. So from what I know, it's probably like 1.5 hours left. Probably, I'm not sure.
Right.
But I could be wrong. Just let me know if it gets critical. Okay. So now we have showed a basic example of how you can use queues anywhere in your system, how you can quickly create jobs, different ones, your own ones. We want to now use that in a more real life experience. So let's imagine we have a file upload. And that's where we come back to exactly the table of the files. Let's have a file upload, and these files need to be uploaded and then processed somehow. So if it's an image, you want to make a preview thumbnail. If it's a video, maybe you even have to re-render it into the proper format for the web output, into the right sizes, depending on how much bandwidth your mobile devices people use have. PDFs might be needed to process somehow or textualized. So we want to upload files, and then in the background we want to process them and give them back to the user afterwards and say, hey, it's now finished, processed, and now it's published, or now you can publish it, depending on the workflow. So here we start already defining a more complex workflow of things. Maybe not as simple as just sending a very basic email. For that, I added a migration file. And in this migration file, we probably want to add a few more fields. So let me see what fields we could need. Yeah, so I guess we'll just stick with processed for now. So if you create a new migrations file with bake or just manually, processed is a Boolean. So thanks to the IDE helper, I have autocomplete here again, and I can select what the type is. In my case, there is a Boolean. So that's the representation as a text here. The underlying technical representation would be a tiny int 1, as you might know. Yeah, so tiny int 1 is the technical underlying representation of it. And null, I would say false, because I want to have it a true Boolean. I don't want to have null and true and false, but only true and false. So if I don't specify anything, it will just be directly false for processed. And we can also add another field that could be published. So if you don't want to auto-publish it, that file, and you want to keep control over that, for example, as a user, you can allow a second Boolean here. You can combine them into a status field. So there are different ways of doing that. For the simplicity reasons, I'm just using now two speaking Booleans. When we have this migration, we want to execute it. This is, again, MySQL and Postgres and everything else agnostic in a way. So it should run on whatever system you're using, whatever database. All I need to do is migrations status first, just to see if it's valid, because there's no exception. That means I have a valid class name and so on. And then I would execute that. Done. So now our migration added 2 new fields to the files. At this point, I can probably bake it. Or did someone already bake it? I'm not sure. Table. Oh yeah, this already has the files table. Okay, what we can do now is we can actually use and leverage the IDE helper to autocomplete to add those fields here. Because as you might find when you're in the files controller, if you have a file now, let's say here, this is a file, you wouldn't have the process on it, right? There is no such field available. But if we run now our bin cake annotate all minus F, and we know that it's about files, so I can just say file. It adds 2 annotations to the models, which most likely added those fields into the entity. Let's see, pro, yeah. So you can see it added those 2 new ones in here. What it doesn't do is auto-adding it here. So that either needs to be done manually, or for simplicity reasons, you say that true and ID false. If you know what you're doing, this is sometimes what you can do. You can also be explicit about it, but it's important to at least know about the accessible part. Otherwise, if you patch it, it wouldn't be accessible. Maybe you don't want to have it accessible. Maybe it should only be set by background processing and never by patching, as a mass assignments. Then you would not set it either to true. Yeah, but for now, I just want to keep it open. And yeah, those are now annotated, and we can use them across our application. The other stuff is all added already, so that's great. At this point, we can also try test-driven development. So if I want to just see if I can now save a file, I don't even need a browser to try that. I could just go into the tests, go into the baked files table test. And what I like to do here is usually to add a very basic save, where I, this files new entity of some data that I know I need. So usually you have this name here, which is my file, and probably the path that gets uploaded. I'll just simulate that now with Fuba. Was there anything else in the migration? The group ID is apparently required. Okay, I guess I will have to then give it some ID, otherwise it will not be happy about that. In our examples now, let's just use 0, if that works. There are no constraints, it will work. The name is definitely required. Apparently also a type is required, so let's see. For a type, we can just say this is a video. It's fine, it is a string, right? Yeah. So we want to say file, and then this file's save or fail we can do. Or we can save the file and then assert not empty the file ID, which means it has been successfully stored, for example, or whatever. You can also already here say this assert empty file get errors. So there is no validation errors. You can do that as well. There are many ways to just quickly scan this. And then you just run it in your, I think it's vendor bin PHP unit in this case, should be installed. Test case model table files table test. Why does it want SQL, MySQL? The test database, is that not set up properly? That is interesting. I would have thought that the test database connects to the same one with the same credentials. No, I'm using Docker, yes. Check Docker Compose environment. Huh, okay. So apparently I will need to do some reconfiguration on that and make sure that I pass the right URLs. But usually you would have the result here, and then it should actually work fine. So that's what I usually do. And then I directly have the results. I know how to specify the minimum fields that I need. And I can actually from that already know if it's true or not. So if I know that a certain field is required and it works without it, then there is something wrong as well. Then I need to go back into the validation and make sure that the required presence for those is set. Yeah, so sometimes you don't want things to be required, optional, and sometimes you want it. Here it's definitely required. If you don't pass the type on create, it will definitely fail. Yeah. Okay. So what we can do is we can actually now do a real test, also with an actual baked files. Oh, the process thing is on there. I'll take that out. So maybe now it likes my controller. Yeah, with the exception of whatever is going on again with my cache clear. So good. New file. Yeah, okay, the group, my file, it's a video. It's whatever path and no metadata. Submit. Okay, so processed apparently needs to be set now because we didn't set it. MySQL is less strict here. Postgres is a bit stricter, so that should be doable by just adding it into that at the end for now. We can later do that automatically by some other things, but processed and oops, done. Jumping around here. And the other one was published. There we go. So now hopefully it is happy about it. Yeah. Yeah, as for the IDE helper, exactly. Composer will tell you the versions in use. So the IDE helper 1.8 is for Cake 4 and 0 versions, I think, for still Cake 3 still. Just saw that question in the channel. So now we can save upload files. I could actually add an upload now for videos and stuff, but this would probably take too long now and would probably be some background process on its own. JavaScript supported usually with larger files. Let's just imagine we have in this process also stored these files. And we want to now process it in the background. When we now think about this and the different file types that we could start to support in the future, we probably want to start thinking in workflows. So not just in if-else cases and adding more if-else while we are going along in the next weeks and months of the development of this application, but a workflow that is visualized and it's able to show what's currently happening to all stakeholders involved. So like the developers for sure, but also maybe some POs and some other like not so technically advanced people in the company, that salespeople maybe that usually wouldn't understand the code. But if you give them a graphic, you will actually see how they will understand the workflows, what do you support currently, what you don't support. So for that, I go back to the slides. And now we want to, talk about advanced usage of queues, but also in combination now with workflows. That can also include auto publishing or like in general, some kind of automated processing. Instead of waiting for someone to manually press buttons in the backend or to confirm something, you can also trigger certain processes in the background, and when they're done, they trigger the next processes. So one queue job finishes, and then it tells the system, hey, now you can continue, and that triggers another queue job and another queue job, and at the end, however complex your whole workflow is, it usually, if it doesn't have any errors, it will completely do that on its own. And of course, you can add notifications in this workflow as well. And you also don't want to have so much hacky if-elses everywhere in that part. So the main requirements would be that this workflow should be extended easily. and not so much hacky additions in the code. And we want to automate it as much as possible. Maybe even over the future. It doesn't have to be right away. It can be a manual process at the beginning, and then you can more and more see how this becomes automated or supported by automation at least. So let's see. Yeah, and for this, we want to use already and introduce already a state machine. A state machine in this case is nothing else than a tool to define certain states and to define how you can go from one state to another. I will talk more about all of those things in detail then tomorrow in an actual presentation of how you use that in real life. Yeah. Right now it's still a bit simulated, but how you use it in a larger setup in real life. For now, I included already the plugin, and I will show a little bit of the documentation just so that you have a very understanding of it. For that, let's see. Yeah, that's definitely a different namespace. So that's the Spryker CakePHP state machine. And if I go into the docs, we can see something about the terminology that we will need now to quickly draft up a demo state machine for us. So most importantly, you have states. Those are the basic definition of each current state the system is in, or in this specific case, the entity is in, because you want to usually define a state machine, not just for a bigger process, but for one specific entity. Each of them has its own process that runs. So if you have one file uploaded, one file would be given the initial state new, or uploaded, or whatever you want to call it. And then you start maybe with processing and publishing and so on. So we have states, we have transitions. They define how you can get from one state to another. It can also sometimes be circular. You can go back if something happens, you need to start over again. And events are the things that can trigger those transitions. So if you have a specific event and you trigger that either through code or through an API call or some other way, maybe sometimes even a timeout, you can trigger the source target transition. And if it worked, if there was no exception, then this will happen. Okay, let's set up the state machine pretty quick. First of all, I want to show you the composer command, or the composer statement here. 1.00 is the right version. You can composer require it or manually put it in here and add it this way. And you can then add it into your application. So also here, you can see that when you did the composer setup again, you will have the state machine auto-completed. One easy command to make sure the tables are available would be the migrations migrate -p state machine. Oops. So that is also happening. And that, by the way, should also, I'll show you that. If you want to, you can connect even to your database directly in the editor, in the PHP Storm IDE here. And you can see now that I have all the tables. I have the files, I have my queue processing, and I have the state machine, which has a lot of log files around, of course, as a logging of what happens. This is important if you use it in a more transactional capacity. So, for example, when you use a checkout and you need to prove that certain transition have happened or what exactly went wrong or something. Then between checkout, payment, refund, and so on, you will have to log more in detail. For us, it's not that important now, but nonetheless, you can have all that here. So let's check the admin backend, because we should also have now a working admin backend for it, which is just /admin/state machine -machine. Yeah. And we can see there is no active state machine yet. It gives us a hint that we want to create it using this command. So that's pretty useful to get started. It's not a bake command, it's just a specific state machine internal initialization command. If we do that, it will tell us that there is a required argument missing. We can call that file processing, maybe. I am open to names here. I think we can even just call it processing, but maybe we keep it a bit more specific. So the state machine maybe should be called file processing. As we can see, it created a XML file, which is called file processing 01. So this is a state machine, and this is the process. Every state machine can have multiple processes. So when you change the process, how it works, all of the items, all of the files that are running through the old state machine will still be in the old process, but the new entities would have a new process, 02, 03, and so on. That allows certain additions to your system over time. And it also created a handler. And the handler will have all of the PHP-specific glue logic involved. So I'll show you that in a second. For now, let's go into the created file. Why is there no? It's weird. There is no Git, but okay, that's fine. I can work with that. It should have a file now, right? It said it created the file in config state machines, yes. So why wouldn't it load disk? Maybe I need to reload the whole thing. Config state machines. Oh, doesn't it matter? Okay, whatever. But it definitely exists. ls-la. Is it a file permission issue? That if you create something with the command line, or do I just need to restart my IDE? It's possible. You can do that. Maybe that helps. Huh? Something is really weird. File params and config state machine folder. Yeah, this Docker thing is apparently also getting me somehow. Do I need to see I own them to something like that? Interesting. Okay, that's a bit annoying because every time I do something, then I will have to do that. All right, I need to figure out this process for the Docker environment. So you have the state machine here. We have some states. We can call it initialized. We can call it uploaded. Doesn't matter. You can also already, if you want to, confirm something between that. So once you start, you would confirm the file is actually existing, and then you would be in the uploaded state. States are usually always an adjective, also what am I? Then you would say, okay, well, maybe with processing, so it's processed at the end. That we don't need. And at some point, it's probably going to be published. That might be enough for the time being, as I mean, we can definitely put a state in with pending, which could be interesting if we want to have an reviewer or an admin to check if it's a okay file or if it's maybe not suited for this kind of audience, you know, like certain right violations or whatever. So pending, published, yeah, even notified could be something if you wanted to. So notified could be that, or just call it closed. At the end, it just has to have some kind of state to finish. We know that now it doesn't need anything anymore. Then we want to probably have a few transitions. Each transition has a source and a target state. So from init, we want to go to uploaded, and probably with some event, but for that we need to invent the event first. So one event would be should we just call it upload. I'm even thinking about calling really this one already uploaded and just calling it processing, because then I can just, the first event could be process. That would probably be a bit quicker now. We don't have that many, we don't have that much time probably. So we go directly from this to process through the event of process. Maybe that. And the same transition we need from processed to pending. Processed to pending. So in this case, it's easier to, of course, draw it. And the event could be, wait, I can clarify that later. We also want to have pending to published. And we want to call the event publish on that one. So, and when it's closed, we would call notify maybe the event to actually close it, because in that, as soon as you notify the user about the video now being online, that's probably the point where this part stops. So we want to have one last one, which is published to closed through the notify one that we just added. Okay, I think that's already a very basic process workflow. The thing is, we want to render this now. So, because it's really hard to understand this, and we want to see something. And for that, we need to make sure that this state machine is now activated. For that, we want to go into the created handler, wherever it is. Yeah. So this is this file processing handler. We can later register commands and conditions. I'll show you that. It has the name, the process, the first state, which it will start with, and that we don't need. and that we also don't need. Okay, so this already looks quite nice. Let's go back to the documentation on that. Where did the documentation go? Ah, I opened it up in this browser. It's confusing. So that's all nice. We want to now hook in that part in the configuration. So the configuration actually enables the handlers because maybe not every handler is currently active. So in our app PHP, we're gonna add this handler, which is the file processing state machine handler. So there we go. And if everything works well, we should be able to see that now in the backend. So this should actually report us, yes, there's a file processing one. And if I open that up, oh no, this Docker environment doesn't have that one. Oh, that's fun. Okay, so much for switching the environment last minute. Plan B, I always have a plan B, I hope. We can use the yeah, we can use that. So let's quickly jump into a demo app that I have, Cake4 local. I think this is actually a copy of it, but on a MySQL machine. So should still work fine. But I need to copy over now this file. So let me do that pretty quick. Switching the environment. File processing. So then we need this part in here. And we need the state machine in source. Oops. Okay. Okay, let's see if that works. Oh yes, okay. So here, this server, it's a Vagrant box, has the necessary tools installed. So we can see that it renders now the image of our workflow. A few things that we can see is the closed state has a double surrounding and all events are just on the arrows directly between each state. I want to add one more thing. Some files do not need to get processed. So in order to make the assessment of you need to process some things, or for example, some don't need the publishing. Some can already be automatically published, for example. So in order to make this workflow a bit more realistic, we also want to add a condition into it. And a condition, for example, for the processing versus not processing. Maybe a zip file doesn't need processing, so you can just directly put it there. In order to make that happen, go into that file, and we add, one second. So in order for that to work, we're just going to take this pending and create a second transition that also goes from processed directly to published. and the event is the same. So maybe we call it decide for now. I'm not sure if wait is the best. So decide. Yeah, okay. Let's see what happens with the state machine. Okay, you can see now it bypasses, oh, actually it doesn't quite work yet because apparently the else is twice in here. So for that, we need a condition on it, yes. So in order to make this possible, you can see here, one is unhappy and the condition. The happy case is usually the one that you want to automatically go to. So this one, most likely, directly to published. And the condition is can be auto-published, for example. Okay, so going back. There we go. So now you can see that in the normal process workflow, it would actually go through the screen line and it automatically publishes it. So if it decides to have, probably even this can be in this condition here, if this condition decides that, yeah, maybe it should be called published actually. Yeah, decide should be called publish. That makes much more sense. Published. Oh, wait. It's a bit weird now. Wait. What did I do? Pending. Ah, this would be manually publish this event. And this would be post-process. Anyway, let's call it decide for now. Naming is sometimes a bit hard. So it's also an artificial workflow that you have to just come out of your head. I'll add also the happy transitions for the rest, just so that it's easier to see the workflow that we want to actually support as happy case. So now it looks, wait, pending, this should not have a happy case. This is not true. Oh. Yeah, this one is not true because that's from the else case. Good. All right. And one more thing that we can usually use is commands. So the notify command, also this down here would definitely be something where you want to, for example, send an email or a notification on the system to that customer or the user. So we can, on the event of notify, we can add a command, which is notify user, for example. You will see it will also be not implemented. So this is just really the state machine as a draft. It doesn't really function just yet. Anything else that might be relevant? Timeouts we just keep out now. All the little games we can not dive into now for time reasons. So I think this should be pretty straightforward already. This would be a manual case. So I think we can probably call the transition, let's see, process is on enter true. So we're going to add automatic transitions where possible. That means when something is uploaded, the system already automatically processes it. It automatically goes to the state process. And here would be a command again, which would be the processing, right? The queue background processing. So that would happen automatically, and then you would run automatically in that. Probably we should call that something different later as decide, but for now let's do this. And the publish event would be manually, because that is something that the user has to do. There is a manual true which would add a button to the backend. So people can actually press that button, the others only if there's an error case. So this transition should happen automatically based on the decision, so we don't need to say anything here. And this one of course has to be executed on enter again. Okay. Quickly, let's implement this commands and conditions very quick. For that, let's go to the. Oh, now I need to. Yeah, great. Now I need to use the vagrant box. Let's hope everything works. Yeah. So bake state machine command. Oh, that's actually the condition. Okay, and the command, what did we name it? Notify user. Yep. Okay, so in my setting, they should now appear as check. We can just return true for the moment. So this would be the Boolean check if it can be auto-published or not. And the notify command would send the notification as email or something. We can just imagine that it would send the email. And in the handler, we need to actually now register them. So the command is, the command here is notify user with the notify user command class. Should be the right handler. Let's see. And this one was can be auto-published, and it registers to can be. Yeah. So those names can be completely like whatever. You can also prefix them. So with like if you have multiple of them, you can call them PDF, notify user, whatever. So that's just, this has to match the XML file, and this is the actual class. And if we're lucky now, it should call them not implemented, not anymore. Yes, so now it's actually working, and it would actually execute that once you run the state machine for a specific item. I don't have any items now, which is fun. Let's see if I can fake that pretty quick. Because now we don't have a migrations file, do we? Add column. Oops, yeah, so add column, at least the name I'm gonna pretty quickly add, which is the text watcher. I think it's a text field, right? No, string. Yeah. String, and it's null false as well. So, what do I? Oh, I actually have the fields, so that's nice. Then cake, bake, migrations, status. Yeah, I have the fields. I just used a different name earlier for the test, so that's gone. All right, so that's cool. We can now use our file entities and upload something as well pretty quick. So in here, we would say files add do I have to add a group now? That's not cool, because I don't have data here. Files add Let's just throw it out. We don't need groups now. Files controller. In here, we can say file group ID _1. It will work. So test video with some path. Is there no data? What happened? What happened to the data in that file? No, it's there. Is it some output issue? Or it's probably some join on the group ID that doesn't exist. I might have to create a random group. Actually, it does exist. Why is files empty? What's going on with you? Index, PageNet contain groups. We don't need the groups, but I would still like to have the files shown. Looks valid. There is definitely a file. Gets mysterious and mysterious over time. Any ideas? While my file is in the database, but not visible. I'm using this MySQL database now. Oh. I think it's actually not the right database because I'm now switching to MySQL, right? So maybe the saving didn't work, which is weird because it should have said here file saved. Okay, I'll try it again. Test group some path. It does say the file has been saved, but it doesn't really save it. That is weird. Find all to array. How many do we have in there? I get the feeling I am still using the wrong. I get the feeling I'm using the wrong one. Darn. I need to put it on a different browser. Okay. That was a bit stupid of my side. I need to go into now what files controller. Yeah, exactly. Oops. Here we need to add those fakes because we wanted it to be saved like this. Which also means that files at here hasn't been really commented out. So test video path. Okay. What is your problem? Group ID exists and this value does not exist. Yeah, okay. we can definitely add a group first. Groups add Name. Oh, does this now also need a user? No, it doesn't. Okay, so now it's there. Good. We have now an entity stored, and maybe we want to just try and execute the state machine. Right. This was the processing back. So now we want to access the state machine for this specific entity and run it through if it works. For this, we would like to connect it, and I think that part we need to link first this to the state machine. So each item can have a state, and we'll link that now in the configuration. So files table. Here, this has one, whatever you call that, that's completely free. And this one should probably be the process. So file processing is the state machine. Good. We implemented the commands and conditions. That's all great. We will have some cron jobs that we need if we want to do conditions and timeouts. So that is also something to check later. We talked about all of that. So now we can trigger certain things. Yeah, let's trigger the state machine for this one new item. And let's do that in the view. So inside of our files controller in the view, wherever it is, yeah, we say if this request is post, and whatever button we click, we can talk about that later. We have a new we have the details. State machine name, we know that it is the file processing. And this is optional. We can also just leave it because it will automatically use the first process available. This one has to come first because we need the file entity as an identifier. So this one will trigger the state machine, and we can see how things go from there. Which means we just need one button in the view. So somewhere down here, after the table, we're gonna PHP echo segment. I'm going to add this link. And because we want to actually see something, we're going to introduce the image of it. So the graph can actually draw it for each specific item. All we need for that is to have the item available. So what is the item here? That's the file. And then the item state. But we can also comment this out for now, because first I want to create the button before we actually display that. And that button is probably something like this. Trigger event is the file item state machine. Actually, I can even make it easier. I can just post to myself, because that will actually work. So let's just post to the own action start. And we're going to post to our own action, which is view file 1. Yeah, let's just try that first. So in our view, oh, that's the group, right? That's the wrong one. We want the files view. So here's the start button. And if we click that start button, what is happening? I might have something to do with the defaults of the application, because it might need identifier quotes true for some of those fields. Let's just try if that changes something. Okay. That didn't throw an error. So that means if we now go to the matrix overview, we see that there is 1 in the state pending. If we go back and list the item specifically, okay, this needs a helper. That should not have happened, but no problem. In the view, we can add the missing helper easily here. This load helper to its format. There we go. Are you now happy? Yeah, that's great. And it should actually also have a view of some sort, if that works. Ah, yeah, very good. So usually you would code your own in your own view for the file, but in the backend you have at least already some CRUD thing for it. So you can see that it already started to process all of that, and because there was no exception and no issue about the command running, it would automatically go here. So later in the process, we will actually implement a queue process here, and only when the queue is done, it will go and finish that part, and so on and so on. But for now, it went into pending, which is interesting because can be auto-published was true, right? So can be auto-published. That returned true. So that is interesting that it actually went into pending state, where it stopped, because from here on you need to publish manually. So you will have a button in your backend where you can zhoops. You can actually do that, and because then it would just do the notify user as a on enter command. It should directly be closed. So if we do that, it should finish it completely. Yeah. So that worked, except for this little glitch here. I will have to think about if there is some condition that I have not thought about. Anything I might be missing? Anyway, so this process would then now trigger a queue process. And when that queue process is done, the queue will trigger the decide and not before. So each of those should put the file a bit further away, also to the next state. And you will probably also, with the published, you want to usually use a command to actually set the file to published. So this Boolean command. We can simulate that as well. So if we bake a command which is called publishing or publish, and we hook it into our state machine. Now we have a lot of stuff open. Okay. Publish command. ID is item DTO get identifier. That's most likely the file ID. And if you do a this load model, use model aware trait. So this load model files. Then our little trick again about annotate. So annotate all minus F publish. Oops, done. Should give us now the files autoload, which can then get the file ID. Then we set this to, I didn't even run here the annotate all minus F file. I need also the updated file stuff. Yep. So now I can set file processed, depending how fast it is. Or did I not set the processed field? Oh, in this one I didn't even set processed, no? No problem, I can do that pretty quick. Add. Yeah, so now migrations migrate. Then annotate file. Maybe the cache, I need to clear the cache probably. In cake, clear cache. Oh no, other way. Cache, clear all. There we go. In cake, cache, clear. Bake, oh, clear. Oh. So. Yep, so now it works because the cache was probably 10 seconds or something, too much. I do not like to work with magic strings and I do not like to work without autocomplete, so that's why. Process, true, and then this files save or fail file. So if that really works, this command should set it to true and save it. All we need to do is put it into the handler. So the handler knows about the command publish, which triggers the publish command class. Verify that this is now in the image. Yeah, that looks good. And we probably want to display it as well, because right now we wouldn't see it. In the files view, we can just add here published, and this format, yes, no, that probably doesn't work here. So let's call it a echo file published, yes, and sans otherwise no, like this. So now it should probably be no at that point. Go away. Where is it? Ah, we are in the state machine part. If we are in the files, oops. Yeah, we see it's not there. Okay, let's reset the state machine pretty quick because usually, well, we can also add a new file and run that new file. That also works. It doesn't matter. In the end, it's the same thing. So if we add a second file, which is a image now, and it has an image path, image. We go to the image view. By the way, the upload itself usually in the after save would trigger the state machine. So this we just do now here, but usually you would move this piece of code into when this entity is stored, because in that way it would automatically transition in the state machine and have the data there. So let's progress. The state machine for this item is now here. And we have just seen that it's not published. But if we either manually now or with some kind of event to trigger publish, so this can also be an API call coming in. If you have an external system hooked up, then you would trigger this somehow at least to move here. And then it should also do the rest of that automatically again. So publish. Okay, that worked without any issues. And I need to just reload normally. No, it's not published. There are some weird things going on here that should never happen. I can only assume my environment setups are a bit hooked up, confused, because this code must be executed, the publish command. And we can definitely die in here, and we would need to have to see something. Maybe it's a file permission issue again. I don't know, but let's throw an exception. Throw new runtime exception, not with me. So this at least should make the state not to continue, because the transition wouldn't work. Okay, files, add, PDF, PDF, PDF. In the PDF, we want to trigger. Oh, I know why. I just told you guys earlier about it, right? Maybe you even told me about this, that the entity is not allowed to change again. These things trip, I trip over them. That's why I put them usually to a different setting. Someone here baked them in a different way than I would do that. Yeah. And it's true. ID false, no mass assignment for sure, but the rest. Okay, I was already confused, but that is a good example because we can actually, with this, show also what happens when the transition fails for some reason. That means we're going to start it now. Which brings us to, oh, wrong ID, next one. Yeah, pending. And now if I click the button, oh, right. Did I forget to actually hook it in? Did I do that? Oh, I'm so stupid. Command. Yeah, that doesn't work, of course. And you could have seen that in the image. I was too blinded by too many open windows. You would be able to see that because it doesn't even write that there is a command. Look at that. Command publish menu acceptable. So that was really something I should have seen. Let's do another image again. Let's start the process. Okay, and then we go to the state machine item for it. Dum, 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 dum. Slow vacant box. Dum, 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 dum. Hello. Yep. And then we trigger publish, and now it behaves as expected. Come on. Yeah, not with me. And this is also locked, and in this locks that I set. So right now, you could already, as an admin, intervene and say, hey, this should not happen for sure, except not these kind of exceptions at least. Now, if I take the exception out of it with me again, so, and I publish, it's processed. And if we refresh this page now, the publish should be yes. Come on. No. Oh my, this is a classic fail. What is wrong with my file? File processed. Wait, oh, okay, another one of my mistakes. Processed, I set to true, but let's just display the other one then. I hope you forgive me on that one. The process is something that I wanted to set Boolean earlier in the whole state machine, but I think we're running out of time. Processed, and this will for sure be yes, no. Yeah, so it does work, but not when you do stupid things on your computer. Okay. All right. How many minutes do we have left?
Around 10 minutes if you want to take some questions.
If any questions, yes. Otherwise, I can also go and do more Q stuff that we wanted to like combine this whole thing together. But I'm happy to take any questions now, if there are any. Is it in this group chat or where is it? No, that's not the window. I do not see the questions and Q&A section for some reason. So if you can relay them to me, that would be helpful, because with this thing, I do not know where the Q&A sections is. Huh. Weird.
They'll be in the Slack, the CakeFest Slack, or.
Okay. So far, I don't see any questions from what I see.
Then you can keep going on your.
Well, there's someone typing at least. Let's wait one more minute. What are some other applications of the state machine? Well, as I said at the beginning, the main usage here is that everyone can communicate on the same table. So when this is actually exactly what the code says, so you can print this and you can put this on the wall or on the table, and all the managers can sit around this together with the developers, and they can say, hey, but why don't you draw this way? And then you can actually draw it, and you always know this is the single source of truth. Usually the problem with documentation is that it's outdated. So while people think that the process is this way, the actual process is already a different way, and it's not graphically or documentally shown. So the workflow in any process in your company, in PHP environment at least, can be helpful to have this kind of very strict way of defining it and making sure that you follow this process in your code as well. So that would definitely be a use case. And then, as we said, more and more automation. If you want to just take small slides, small parts of this bigger state machine, and you want to just automate that, you can do that. So you can make state machines. And this way you can have partial automation on that, and that will definitely help in the long run to reduce the costs. How do you manage internally changes in workflows when there are instances running in the middle of a deployment? That's a very good question. If there is really this 1 second leap where you have that kind of persistency problem, then it would throw the exception. And as we said, this exception would just keep the process in that state that you have been in. So you would, depending on how you solve it, either automatically retransition with a restart, or you would have someone in the backend to trigger, to click the hey, let's try this again button. And so you can have a dashboard for that. We have an error dashboard, and that shows us which states. I think the matrix actually does that in a way, but it's a very basic one, of course. You want to have a more sophisticated one. The state machine file processing. Let's see, matrix overview. So the idea of a matrix is, if we have more states here, you can see how many of your items are in what state. And a more sophisticated one even mentions how long they are in one state. Is it a day, is it a week, or is it a month? And then based on these kind of things, if you have experience, you can already highlight some things in red, and you can say, hey, some things are stuck for too long in a certain state, and you have to intervene manually and fix it. But most of the time you will not have that many of issues, because it's often quite self-healing, or can be triggered with some button somewhere from the right user perspective. Okay, I guess I'll finish for this kind of talk now, because tomorrow I'm going to talk more about the real life part of that anyways. And I will push this branch as a queue, I think feature/queue branch. So you can play with this, you can try it out. You can also just go to the sandbox, because it also has queue and state machine examples then. And yeah, play around with that and see how if you can make a good state machine. If you can come up with a good one, like a good example, feel free to send it to me, either through Slack or through email or something, because I'm curious and I would like to implement those also as examples and for others on the sandbox to just, yeah, have some good examples as showcases. Mine are right now not the best yet, so looking for your input. All right, let's go back to my last slide, wherever that one is. I think that was my workshop end, and not the real end, because now we have a different schedule. That's why I'm going to yield back to